I want to talk about a few things because what's going on right now, you got the Democrats throwing the president under the bus, saying it's terrible immigration policy, he's a racist, he's a Nazi, he's a xenophobic. As you've seen in congressional testimony, I've been called a bigot, I've been called a Nazi, and like I told Wasserman Schultz, if I'm a racist for enforcing the law, what are you? You wrote the law. Of course, I got no response. They don't want you to talk. But we're in a fight for our lives. There's two things the Democrats are pouncing on: zero tolerance, family separation, and the national emergency on the border, suspending illegal immigration. So I want to talk about one, because I want to educate you and tell you what I know to be facts so you can share it with your friends and family. Why does separation of families happen? Why does zero tolerance happen? Well, I'll tell you why it happened. Because at the time, the president knew what I knew. You know, number one, there was illegal entry on the border, unprecedented levels. It was looking at 1 million illegal entries that year. Based on the month-to-month apprehensions, it was estimated to be 1 million illegal entrants. That was unprecedented. It happened 20 years ago, but it was 95% Mexican nationals. Now, a good Border Patrol agent, because I was one, you can process a Mexican national in 20 minutes and send him across the line in 30. And many of these arrests, that 1 million back there in the early 90s and late 80s, there were multiple arrests. I arrested the same illegal alien 4 times in one shift. That's a true story. I remember it because he was missing 3 fingers. And by the 3rd time, I'll say, what the hell, you know, wait down there to the next shift. I'm tired of you. But that 1 million illegal entries were probably more like 500, 600,000. This 1 million coming across were mostly Central Americans. 70% of them were women and children by themselves, unaccompanied children. So why did zero tolerance happen? Why did family separation happen? Because the president had to take action. Let me tell you why. Because the Border Patrol had 50 to 60% of their workforce, agents, off the line. They're changing diapers, they're making baby formula, they're making hospital runs. Half of the Border Patrol, this is not exaggeration, was no longer on the line. They were taking care of these families. So what does that tell you? Border is vulnerable. Not only to illegal immigration, but to drugs. Oh, let's see, what happened during that time? 60,000 people died of opioid overdose. That came across the southern border. And don't listen to Democrats, because they'll say, well, most drugs come through the port of entry. They do not. Most drugs are seized at a port of entry because every car is stopped, and you talk to everybody, so chances are, if you're going to smuggle drugs to a port of entry, you know you're going to be stopped. You know you're going to be questioned, but based on that question, they're going to search your vehicle. So most drugs are seized at a port of entry, but we don't know what we don't know between the ports of entry because most of those vehicles come through. When I was a Border Patrol agent, I got a truck coming across with 210 kilos of cocaine that drove right through over the barbed wire fence. 2 years ago, I went back there during a conference, drove up there. Now there's a big, beautiful wall. There's no truck coming across there now. So the president realized that the borders are vulnerable to illegal immigration, it's vulnerable to drugs, so we got 60,000 overdose deaths. And if you're a terrorist someplace in this world and you want to come here and blow something up, it's hard to get a plane ticket anymore after 9/11 because all the database checks that are done. It's hard to get a visa because of visa security program. They run names through all these databases. Any derogatory information, you're not getting a visa, you're not getting a plane ticket. So how are you going to come to the United States and hurt us? You're going to come the same way 12 to 20 million others did, through the southwest border, especially when half the Border Patrol agents are no longer on the line. So the president realized this is not just a humanitarian crisis, this is just not an immigration crisis. We have a national security crisis. We've got 60,000 people dying of overdose deaths. We're wide open to terrorism. And at the same time, 31% of the women who make that journey through the smuggling cycle get raped, and children were dying. So if we look at why did a president declare, and Jeff Sessions declare zero tolerance? National security, public safety, women being raped, children dying. What else was he supposed to do? And the Democratic leaders in Congress would not help him one iota. And you've seen me on the Hill a few times. I've had it out with them because they want to sit there and constantly vilify the President of the United States. At the same time, I speak up and say, wait a minute, you didn't do anything. I was up for 2 years asking you to close the loopholes that bring these people through, and you didn't do anything. So the president, with all this all this in front of him, what did you expect him to do? He wanted to say, okay, zero tolerance. We're going to start prosecuting everybody that comes across that country illegally. And if that's a woman and a child, then guess what? That woman will be prosecuted. Just like any U.S. citizen mother gets prosecuted and her child separated in this country. If you drive home tonight DUI and you got a child in the car, that child's not going to Dallas County lockup or Fort Worth lockup. That child's going to go either to Child Protective Services or to relative. So it's no different for those entering the country illegally. If you want to claim asylum, you come through the port of entry and make an asylum claim. If you want to claim asylum, doesn't mean you violate our laws. You can't want to be part of the greatest country on earth and not respect our laws. You can't have it both ways. You want to be a part of this country, our laws make us the greatest country. If you don't respect the laws, you shouldn't be a part of this country. And the president recognized that. So I took a lot of heat. Homan said, you remember that, I don't know if you watched the hearing with AOC. She's a moron. She thought she had her Perry Mason moment, and she said, I found a memo, Mr. Homan, and I was testifying. I said, all right, let me see it. I said, you authored that memo. No, I didn't author it. I signed it. You signed that memo. Yes, I did. And she tried to take me to task. Of course, she's a moron. She doesn't know, I don't know how in the hell she became a congresswoman. Maybe she can make a good pina colada, but she's not very good at being a congresswoman. Well, then she tried to ask him about the rule of law. It's a crime, ladies and gentlemen, to enter this country illegally. And what was really pathetic is I had to spend time out of my testimony to explain to a lawmaker that entering this country is a violation of law. That's pretty pathetic if you think about it. So, so the president made the right move. Did anybody want zero tolerance to happen? No. No one wants to see that happen. It's sad. Law enforcement is sad. I've seen a lot of sad things in my day. It doesn't mean you stop doing it. Doesn't mean you just throw your arms up in the air and say, okay, well, come on. We can't do it. So zero tolerance was a law enforcement response to a national security crisis. And those people could have went to a port of entry, like I said, made their fear claim and not been arrested, which means they wouldn't have been separated. But we can't, and one thing you won't hear from the media, it worked. In the 3 weeks they did it, crossings in the Rio Grande Valley dropped 28%. If they would have stuck with it for 30 more days, we wouldn't have the surge in the caravans you saw. So it worked. No one wants to talk about it. I refuse to apologize for it, because as a career law enforcement officer, my job is to enforce the law and protect the United States in any legal means possible. With 60,000 overdose deaths climbing, with women being raped, with children dying, cartels making millions, the same cartels that attacked Mr. Avila, we're bankrolling them by letting this continue. The president said, enough. We're going to prosecute. We're going to enforce the law. That is what the truth is. So don't let the left don't tell you anything different. As far as the children in cages, I'm sick and tired of the cages. First of all, the cages, if they want to call them cages, they need to accept the fact the cages were built, funded, and approved under the Obama administration. I know, because I was there. I went to the facility when they're being built. Border Patrol built, and let me tell you what, they're not cages, they're big chain link dividers that keep children away from unrelated adults. It's called protecting the children until HHS could take custody of them and put them in a child shelter. That's what it was. They weren't cages. But if you want to keep talking about cages, then you need to at least admit that they're funded, approved, and built under the Obama administration. And why were these children? These children were coming across the country. It was a 400% increase in UACs. And they said, shame on the U.S. government locking these children in cages, then locking them in an HHS facility. They put them in an HHS licensed daycare facility. That's where these children were. And they called that inhumane. What I think inhumane is that their parents hired a criminal organization to put their kid in the trunk of a car in the back of a tractor trailer and have them smuggled to the United States. That's what's inhumane. And at the same time, they want to point to 2,500 families separated. There was 14,000 children in the custody of HHS that came to the United States on their own. But no one wants to talk about that. That's the facts. You want to talk about inhumane? It's inhumane to hire a criminal organization to smuggle your child. If your child's really in danger in El Salvador and Guatemala and Honduras, what the hell are you doing here? So when I was a director, I tried to get an agreement with HHS, let ICE run when the child gets here and they contact the parent or the sponsor of the United States, let ICE run the data checks. If they're illegally in the United States, we won't take them into custody, but we'll put them in proceedings with the child. So that 7-year-old, when he stands in front of the judge, he's not standing in front of the judge by himself. He's there with his parent, who's also in the country illegally, the parent that had him smuggled into the country. Let them stand together and plead their case to the judge for asylum. I call that parenting first. Second of all, I call it responsibility. It didn't happen.